Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live. The healthcare industry has been forced to expand to meet the urgent needs of the pandemic. How digital health rose to the occasion when the world shut down from COVID-19. Then we sit down with the CEOs of two companies on LinkedIn's 2020 top startups list who pivoted, thrived, and led their small companies into big things. That and more coming up. Hello, everyone. I'm Susie Jackson, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins. Here is a quick look at the top stories professionals are talking about today. Protests over the killing of Breonna Taylor intensify. Two officers in Louisville, Kentucky were shot during demonstrations last night after a grand jury did not charge any of the officers involved in Taylor's death with her killing. According to the Louisville police chief, the officers' injuries are not life-threatening. The pandemic responsible for $3.5 trillion in lost working hours. That's the figure for the first 3 quarters of 2020 compared to last year, according to the International Labor Organization. The ILO also projecting global working hour losses in the equivalent of 245 million jobs for the fourth quarter. CEOs are speaking out about remote work, execs of major companies sharing their opinions on the shift in work culture brought by the pandemic. Reed Hastings of Netflix calling remote work a pure negative. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink saying they'll likely never have a full staff in the office again. And Warren Buffett saying the supply and demand for offices will change significantly. You can stay on top of the news by checking out the LinkedIn News module to the right of your newsfeed on your desktop, or if you're on mobile, by clicking into your search box. We have been polling professionals on the LinkedIn News page, and we want to hear from you as well. Today, we're asking if the pandemic has changed the way you access healthcare services. You can tell us by voting in the stream. You can say the services have changed by primarily being in person for you, by being B, mostly digital, C, a combination of both. Or if it's D, something else, give us some context. Tell us what is changing for you and how you're accessing these services. Most of the healthcare companies on this year's LinkedIn Top Startups list were not thinking about a pandemic when they launched their businesses, but they are nevertheless poised to capitalize in a moment when healthcare is undergoing tremendous digital transformation. Joining us now are LinkedIn's managing editor, Beth Kutcher, and LinkedIn's marketing editor, Callie Schweitzer. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Susie. Hi.
Hi, Beth. I want to start with you this morning. The healthcare industry has not traditionally been fast-moving when it comes to the consumer side of digital technology. Talk to us about the 7 healthcare companies on LinkedIn's 2020 Top Startups list. We've never seen that many. What kinds of services are they providing?
Yeah, lots of healthcare companies on this year's list, but what was notable about that is that only a few of them were actually tackling problems directly related to the coronavirus pandemic. Most of them are actually tackling problems that are fundamental to healthcare, like how to make care more accessible, more convenient, more efficient, things like prescription drug delivery and virtual care, or addressing an unmet need like mental health services.
So convenience is a big factor here. Maybe scheduling appointments, getting your health records from doctor to doctor hasn't been that easy. Callie, staying on the idea of convenience, Capsule is number 15 on the list. It's a same-day prescription delivery service. It's differentiated by being convenient, but also for the way it talks to customers. Can you tell us more about that?
Capsule was founded on a very simple premise, which is, what would your pharmacy experience be like if your mom or dad were your pharmacist? That's exactly how they want to be communicating with you. So the idea is really your parent as your pharmacist would get you coupons and make sure your health insurance was taken care of and give you great service, drop it off same day. And the idea really being here an intimate and personal relationship, which is very different than how a lot of the other healthcare companies interact with you.
So intimate and personal, talking to you like your mom or dad, really checking in to make sure that you're okay from end to end of this process. The talking to you like mom isn't new. We remember Choose Your Mom, Choose Jif from the 80s and Werther's Originals you talked about in your reporting. But that tone is different in this space. What is that different? Why was that a big risk for a healthcare company to take?
Capsule is up against retail titans like CVS Health and Amazon's PillPack, And neither of those brands have a relationship with people that is considered intimate or personal. They may know all of your personal details, but they're certainly not communicating with you like a loved one. And so Capsule actually really only had the option of taking this risk in order to differentiate itself in the market. It would be a much, much bigger risk for legacy brands like CVS to make a pivot and completely change their communication style to be more like Capsule.
So sometimes that smaller entrant is able to be more nimble and take bigger swings than the established partners can. I want to say hello to some of the members joining us in the stream right now. We have Diana from Colorado. Welcome. Paul from Montana. Steve from Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn too, Steve. Hi, hello, neighbor. Alberto from Texas. Diane from Florida. Thank you for joining LinkedIn News Live. Talking right now about some of the healthcare companies on LinkedIn's 2020 top startups list. Beth, I want to talk about telemedicine for a minute. I know you covered a lot of this in your reporting. It was something that was already around before the pandemic, but how much has it accelerated, and what can we expect to happen as to this rapid growth as we continue on in this pandemic?
Yeah, telemedicine is just exploding. I spoke to one hospital operator, health system in Washington State, the largest one there, Providence, and they were already way ahead of the curve. They're surrounded by major tech giants in Seattle. And last year they did 70,000 virtual visits over 2019. This year they've already done over 1 million. So just exponential growth. And I think the more people are trying it, what we're seeing in LinkedIn polls is they like it. You know, you don't have to take off work. You can just have, especially if it's just a quick follow-up, a prescription renewal, 5 minutes on Zoom or a social or a virtual platform. I think the big question going forward is what's going to happen after the pandemic, because one of the catalysts for this was that Medicare and other private insurers said that they would reimburse telemedicine visits on par with in-person. If after the pandemic they dial that back, then I think healthcare providers will need to make a decision about whether the financials actually work for them.
Okay, so we're seeing in that graphic there, digital health funding is on the rise. Callie, I want to talk about Capsule for a moment again. You mentioned that this is this new intimate voice and how it's easier for a company like that to take a risk like that in a pandemic. Do you think that there are parallels here for other marketers in the ways that they should be changing the way they're talking to their customers?
Many direct-to-consumer companies have always positioned themselves as your friend. They've always tried to communicate with that more intimate voice. What's so unique about Capsule is bringing that into the healthcare space, which is not necessarily warm and fuzzy or known to be. Maybe Capsule will change that. But this idea of the intimate relationship is something that I think a lot more brands are going to be trying to get toward with the coronavirus, because everybody wanted to pitch themselves as here for you and supportive of you in these tough times. And I think we'll see a lot of brands, and other marketing experts have told me they believe that lots of brands will start making this shift as well.
Thank you, Callie. So we're hearing about brands trying to take some new chances here. Beth, let's go back to you and talk about some of the new technologies that are coming out of this. What are you seeing, and what do you think is going to stick around?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I heard over and over in my interviews is that the pandemic didn't introduce any new trends, but it just accelerated older trends. And one thing we're hearing a lot about in healthcare over the past several years is consumerism in healthcare, that people have more choice, they change healthcare providers more frequently. So anything that gives healthcare providers a competitive edge and makes healthcare more convenient, accessible, will definitely rise to the top. I think mental health is finally having a moment. It used to be sort of siloed from what we thought of as traditional healthcare. I think it's about time that the two are embedded together. And then I think this one is sort of a wild card, but I think we've seen that social justice issues and racial justice issues have come to light because of the pandemic, and seeing this as disparity in terms of who's affected, how badly they're affected. Some of those solutions are going to be low tech. But some of them, like being able to use data to identify vulnerable populations, to figure out, help doctors make care decisions, I think all those sorts of technologies will continue to see momentum.
That's great. Thank you for that, Beth. We're going to be keeping an eye on some of those technologies as we continue to live through this pandemic moment. Beth Kutcher, Callie Schweitzer, news editors at LinkedIn, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
So Beth was just talking about mental health being one of the things that she thinks is going to get some more emphasis and be talked about more as the pandemic stretches on. When we think of staying healthy during COVID-19, we often think about temperature and other physical symptoms. But one company that made it onto this year's top startups list is focusing on that mental health aspect as we go through this unprecedented pandemic. I want to welcome to the show right now, Allison Watson. She is the CEO of Modern Health. Allison, welcome to LinkedIn News Live.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I want to talk about the cultural shift that we've seen since the pandemic began. We just heard Beth talking about mental health there, kind of burgeoning, being something on people's minds more than we're open to talking about it. There was a stigma associated with it before. How do you see that changing?
It's really interesting. We've seen this kind of shift and change in culture and society where the way that we work now is very different, right? We are now tethered to technology in a way that we didn't used to be not that long ago. And if we think about the rate at which technology has advanced and civilization has progressed, we as humans actually haven't progressed to keep up with that. So it's like we have a V1 operating system in a V1000 world, and mental health is now the #1 cause of disability worldwide. So it's the #1 reason that people take off from work is related to mental health. And of course, this has just been accelerated in year 2020 with everything we've seen so far.
And in the past, we've seen companies come to you perhaps with issues that were more easy to talk about in an office setting, about burnout or work-life balance. But I'm curious about how that's expanding. Are companies coming to you and having different kinds of conversations about what they want and what they want for their employees?
Completely. So what's happened is there's been a whole change around the conversation with mental health. It used to have even more of a stigma than it does today. And as mental health becomes more destigmatized, more people feel comfortable going to their heads of benefits, heads of people, heads of HR saying, hey, I'm struggling and I need support. And I tried our health plan and I tried our EAP and these things didn't work for me. So what can I do? How can I get the support that I need? So as this conversation has really destigmatized mental health, which is great, more people are raising their hand and saying, hey, I really need support. That's causing more and more employers to prioritize this. It has truly become the top priority for all employers across the board. And we're seeing this ourselves at Modern Health. I mean, we've had over 10x growth in the past year. Our company has doubled in size since March, since shelter in place started. And we're working with companies like Lyft, Okta, EA, Pixar. So we're really seeing this as a top priority across all companies, across all industries.
It's great for your company to know that growth is happening at such a rapid clip. I'm curious, as the growth happens, what does that mean for the services you're offering? Or is there more demand for one type of service, one type of employee support than another on the company and on the individual level?
It's interesting. We did our own state of the industry research report, and we found that 50% of adults said that this is the most stressful time of their entire lives. And so that's increased demand overall to engage in their mental health. And we're seeing demand across the entire platform. So since shelter in place started, we've seen a 50% increase in activity in Modern Health's platform. And that's across therapy, mental health coaching, that might be digital programs that are evidence-based to treat things like depression. We're seeing that the #1 topic that people are looking to get support from is around anxiety and stress. There's a lot of factors that play into it, but as you guys can all imagine, this is arguably the disaster year of our generation, which is causing people to really want to lean in and get support that they need.
Yeah, you're talking about that increase in demand. And I want to hear from you in the stream as well. How are you dealing with your mental health during the pandemic, if you're comfortable sharing that with us?
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead, please.
It's interesting. When this whole thing started, I feel like our team really rallied together and they were like, okay, this feels like a sprint. We need to go all out and really give it our all to be able to help so many people during a time in need. And I'd say the first 6-8 weeks of shelter in place, people were just working around the clock. And then it got to the point where we were like, wait a second, this is really impacting our own mental health. I was experiencing burnout for the first time in my life. And it almost took me, I remember writing an email at work and I was trying to write like 3 sentences and I was just staring at my computer for 45 minutes. And I finally shut my computer, went for a run, came back and shared with my whole company, this is really hard and this is going to be hard for a while. And we really need to be there to support each other. I know I had said we all need to go 110%, but I know that that's not realistic now. And so we need to take care of each other. And so from then on, we increased our mental health stipend. We're offering parents $1,000 a month to get support for childcare. We're having more flexible schedules. We're encouraging mental health days. So really doing whatever we can to support each other because it is hard and it's important to be vocal about it and to be vulnerable, especially as a leader.
That's great to know that you were able to take that moment as well for yourself and then be a leader and lead by example for the rest of your company. I want to say hello to a few members joining us in the stream today. We have Brenda from North Carolina. Juan is coming to us from Mexico. Welcome to LinkedIn News Live. Quentin from Virginia, Diane from Florida, and Jean from San Diego, also on the West Coast there with you, Allison. Thank you so much for joining us today and helping us continue to break down some of that stigma around mental health and talk about the ways that your company is helping to support people through this challenging time.
Thanks for having me.
We just heard Allison talking about breaking down the stigma around mental health. And my next guest is the co-founder of another company in a growing industry with its own share of stigma from some quarters. I want to welcome Ross Lipson to the program. He is the co-founder and CEO at Dutchie. It's an e-commerce provider for the cannabis industry and the number 12 company on the LinkedIn's top startups list. Ross, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Dutchie's behind the online ordering for dispensaries throughout the US and Canada. It's this burgeoning industry, but it's tricky too. Laws can be different across states and countries. I'm wondering if you can tell us how it works doing business in an industry that's so unique like this.
Yeah, it's definitely comes with its own challenges, but we see challenges as opportunities. And the cannabis space, it's unique, and it's a nascent industry that's very explosive. With that, of course, is the opportunity. But as regulations change and as each state legalizes for recreational or medical use, we find that everything is evolving and changing constantly on a dime, which puts us on our toes, which is a good thing, but keeps us on kind of our head on a swivel, making sure that we're adaptive and agile to meet the needs of the industry and our consumers and retailers.
So you've got that industry where laws and regulations are changing all the time. I have friends in that industry too, and the stories they tell are just mind-blowing about all cash payments and some of the dangers associated with that. But since that you're providing software and not actual delivery, does it make it easier to get around some of that uncertainty?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a model that we're quick to go down that path. It's a lighter model. The economics are a bit more favorable, and you're right. We're a bit arm's length from some of the regulations that the retailers deal with. And being in the software space, it helps all of that.
So you're at an arm's length, but from an industry that is seeing demand explode throughout this pandemic, what has that done for your business?
Yeah, it was. We were hit with a curveball like everybody else in the world. Fortunately, we were a tool that was positioned to provide a solution for our consumers and our retailers to surge through the pandemic. When shelter in place first hit in mid-March, we saw our order volume surge about 700%. Currently, we do about 75 to 80,000 orders a day, which annualizes out to 2.2 billion in sales on the platform. And we also saw a huge demand from retailers needing to adopt our service and implement it immediately. So as great as that is, and seeing a surge and an uptick and increasing in demand, it also presents its set of challenges. It was a stress test for all of our people at the company, our product, our processes, and our tech. And fortunately, we had the framework and foundation in place to come out on the other end in a good way.
I'm wondering if one of those challenges too is competition. As the industry is growing and needing more service, are you seeing more competition in your space? And if so, how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people eyes wide open jumping into the cannabis space. Maybe you can call it the green rush, if you will. I would say in our specific sector of e-commerce, there's not as much competition out there as you'd imagine. And the reason being is our space, as opportunistic and as explosive as it is, it's very nuanced. It's unlike a lot of spaces due to regulations and how fragmented it is per state, whereas each state has their own regulations and kind of operates differently. Most of the platforms and the operators don't have their SOPs dialed as much as maybe a industry that's been around for longer. So there's definitely a barrier to entry, and I would say it specifically relates to the nuances of the cannabis space.
So we see barrier to entry, even though there's a lot of demand going on right now. How do those things converge in how you see the industry and where it's moving in the future?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely positive. We're seeing the space, the CAGR on the industry is increasing fast. It's definitely explosive, and I think that we're coming upon an inflection point in cannabis, especially at a high level from a federal legislation standpoint. There's definitely a lot of movement bubbling up. The space continues to provide positive effects for not only the users and for the businesses, but for the economies surrounding it. So I think that the future is very bright for the cannabis space. We're continuing on an upward trend. I think that we're going to start to see players emerge as leaders, more investors come into the space, as well as the public markets start to adopt the space as well. So it looks like it's all good from here, but of course will present its challenges and a lot of turns that we'll have to make as we progress.
So you're in this industry, you're playing it along as it goes. We see demand spiking, we see laws and regulations being kind of tricky in some spaces. But I want to talk for a second about an industry that you were in previous to this that was a little more straightforward. I know that you built and sold a food delivery company prior to this. I'm curious if there are parallels between these two businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to Dutchie, I was the co-founder and CEO of Grub Canada. And Grub Canada, founded in 2008 out of Toronto in Canada, was It was Canada's first online food ordering service. And we did a really great job there a few years into it. It scaled the country, worked with tens of thousands of restaurants. And we later in 2012 sold it to Just Eat. There's definitely a lot of parallels. It's where the birth story definitely of Dutchie originated from my background in online food ordering. I like to say it's the same, but different. The model's the same, very similar. An organization from how we've set it up, a lot of the framework, the KPIs that we use are very similar. However, there's a lot of differences in cannabis as well. The value prop to the consumer in food is focused on convenience and selection, as much as that is a value prop to the consumer in cannabis. There's a bit of a different value to the consumer, which in online ordering in cannabis, unlike food, there's this whole education. You don't care to know too much about the slice of pizza before you order it. You don't really care where the cheese came from, for example, on a pizza. But in cannabis, you want to know the THC, CBD percentage, the type, read a description, learn a lot about the brand behind the product, maybe see a photo, understand the effects. So in the cannabis space, the value prop is very different, where the consumers are leaning on online ordering to see what's in stock at the dispensary before going there. And that is convenient, but more so in the form of education. I want to learn about the products before I order them, which is different from the food space.
Well, Ross, I'm in New York where we take pizza pretty seriously, but I will admit you're right. I don't think about where the cheese came from on my pizza. I might now. You are based in Bend, Oregon, and I know many of the startups on our list are hugging the coastlines of New York City and San Francisco, but location matters a little bit less in this remote working moment. I'm curious about what it's been like to build a company outside of those hiring hotspots and what other companies can learn from you about attracting top talent.
Yeah, so I think it's an entrepreneurial spirit to kind of question the status quo, right? So we've come up in this tech industry, at least I have. I'm only 33 years old. I'm young, learning that it's all about Silicon Valley, San Francisco area, as well as New York and a few other hotspots. I've constantly liked to challenge that, and I think we've found a lot of success in doing so. And now, don't get me wrong, there's definitely positives and weaknesses there. There's less of a pool of talent local. However, the pool of talent that is local, it's not as competitive as in the Bay, for example, or in New York. Our compensation bands also are also a little bit more favorable for a startup, if you will. At the end of the day, we've had a lot of success building our business in Bend. We're happy that we have done so, and we plan on continuing to stay here and headquarter out of here. However, we are a fully distributed team now. Obviously, everybody's working from home. We look forward to getting back into the headquarters here in Bend, but we'll continue to source talent from across the country.
And I know you're hiring right now. So for the viewers in the stream who are looking for jobs, what are you looking for in an ideal candidate?
Yeah, mainly. So we're hiring across all departments. Definitely a heavy focus on product and engineering right now. But definitely across all departments, and check out Dutchie.com's career page if I could plug it there. What we're really looking for is strong culture fit and understanding employee engagement and development, especially now. It's a theme that you heard from Modern Health as well as many other companies through the pandemic that's really brought employee engagement to light. And if we could look at the positive of the pandemic, which is hard to do, but it's nice to find the light in the darkness, if I could say that. Employee engagement's always been important. It's maybe been something that was more overlooked, and now we're focused to bring it to the forefront. And we can still do that by virtual hangouts, if you will, and becoming more social virtually. Even when in the same area and in the same office, or in the same town, we don't tend to be as social with our employees after hours. Pandemic has really a lot of people are dealing with a lot of mental health issues, as we've heard about on the show and across the board. And employee engagement helps, and we can lean on our companies, our coworkers as our family, people that we can lean on to be social with, even outside of work hours. So things we're doing is we have a book club going where we meet weekly. We're doing monthly movie nights that we can talk about. We're doing trivia nights that get us together. A lot of fun things like that. And it's really encouraging to see how employees are not only just engaging, which is correlating to success at work, but more so just becoming friends, becoming social. And it allows us to become more than just a team, more than just colleagues or coworkers, but more friends. So if I'm being optimistic, which I like to be, it's definitely a light in the darkness of the pandemic right now. And I hope that most companies are looking at positive things that are coming from it.
Well, if you're in the stream and you're looking for a light in the darkness, we have a very positive CEO here from Dutchie. Ross Lipson, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to take a look at our poll from the LinkedIn news page and see what you've been saying in the stream. We were asking if the way you access healthcare services have changed since the pandemic. And it looks like many of you say it's a combination of both being primarily in person and some digital. We have, let's see, Anat Dolores is saying that primarily in person. Dolores says still accessing healthcare services the same way, but going with a mask, social distancing, using hand sanitizer at the office. Mostly digital, we heard from Tom, and a combination of both. We heard from Diane, Alejandra, and also Tom. So Dolores says that she likes the idea of telehealth and would use it for follow-ups and prescription refills to save time for sure. Thanks us for talking about it in that segment. Yeah, there are some things you just need to do in person, but if you can get it done online at this point, why not? Tomorrow on LinkedIn News, we have Get Hired Live. My colleague Andrew Seaman will be talking to Madeline Mann. She is the founder of Self-Made Millennial. They will be talking about tips and best practices for your job search. Thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live today. I'm Susie Jackson.